Unlock the secrets, learn new tactics, and build a winning strategy to win the aging game. Welcome to the Aging Game with Bruce and Susan.
So, welcome to the Aging Game with Bruce and Susan. It's great to have everyone here. We have a great host with a great guest. Sorry.
Oh, I am a great host.
You are a great host, Susan. And we have a great guest with Jeff Alexander. He's the Director of Business Development from Avow Hospice. So, we're going to talk a lot about hospice and try to create or clear up some of the confusion about what hospice is and what it covers and all that. So we are season 2, episode 7, and it's great to have everyone here and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you here today. I'm most excited because I think that so many people just have like a negative connotation of hospice. And I know over the years that I've had the pleasure of, learning and working along you guys, I've realized all the positive things you do. And I think that I'm most excited today to bring that to our listeners so that they can maybe remove that stigma and understand all the good that you do, and that while some of it may be sad, it can still be really beautiful and happy too. Yep. And I love the stuff you guys do in the community. So I do want to talk about a couple of those things too.
Sure.
And let people know there. But yeah.
So before we start diving into all the different questions, Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from and what brought you here to Naples and Avow?
So I actually grew up outside of DC, spent most of my childhood there. Spent a couple years in Tennessee, and then made my way to Indiana, where I spent about 20 years and got my feet wet, if you will, in hospice. I've been doing hospice now for about 15 years and love it.
What part outside of D.C.?
Northern Virginia. So anybody familiar with the Civil War?
Alexandria?
Manassas. So
Manassas.
Civil War, first and second battles of Bull Run occurred there.
Really? How cool.
I started in senior housing, and I worked at a community near Fort Belvoir. So know it very well.
I lived in Annapolis for 6 years. I was near you.
You're there.
Ish. Yeah. So before we get started, so last week we were talking about like Medicare and Medicaid, and we always have questions that come in from our listeners. And one of the ones that we had, I think, ties in a little today, which is, does Medicare cover any sort of hospice services? And I know we're going to get into that more today, but that was kind of the overwhelming. And we never talked about it last week.
No. So good question. And let's just kind of put that on a shelf and we'll talk about it in a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So really good question.
When experience matters the most, Senior Housing Solutions uses over 30 years of industry knowledge to provide expert advice for those considering a move to a senior living community. We are the matchmakers of senior housing. Call today at 239-595-0207 for your free consultation.
So, Jeff, can you talk about just kind of describe hospice care? There's so much confusion between what hospice is and all that. Sure. So just kind of give us like a down and dirty of hospice care.
Yep. And as you mentioned, a lot of people are afraid of the word. And that really is probably our biggest hurdle in the hospice world, is everybody thinks that when you get on hospice, you're going to be not with us in the next 5 days. Mm-hmm. And really, the way the hospice benefit is structured, you can actually get on hospice and be on hospice for 6 months or less were a disease to take its normal course. That's typically what the guidelines indicate. However, the last part, were the disease to take its normal course, is the most important part. Many people are familiar with Jimmy Carter and how long he has been on hospice, and what he's doing is no different than living his life. He just chose not to go to the hospital anymore and not to have a whole lot of interventions. He just wants to be comfortable for whatever's left. And that's really what hospice is about. It's not about accelerating the time frame. It's not about anything like that. It's really more about how do we enjoy what we have left.
I love that. As I was preparing for this, I always like to find statistics. I'm a little bit of a numbers nerd. And so I read one, and it said that the average length of stay on hospice was 92 days. Do you think that that's accurate, or?
I think that's high.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't hear about hospice until they're in the hospital dying. If you ask me how we get over the hurdle of that misconception, it starts with the doctor's office before you're even sick. What do you want when you get to that point in your life? Because if you tell a doctor that you're going to be ready for hospice when it's appropriate and you want them to engage in that conversation, they're going to be more likely to be comfortable having that conversation with you, because somebody telling you that your life is about to come to a conclusion is a very difficult thing for people to deal with.
It is. Staying along that, then I guess I'll ask you my favorite question, which is, what is something you know today that you wish you knew earlier?
So one of the biggest misconceptions or myths in hospice is that they just kill you, that
Yeah.
they stop all your medications, that they're just going to, give you drugs to help you go quickly. And that's not the case. We have a wide variety of medications that people are still on, and they're maintenance drugs more than they're curative drugs. And that's the real difference. Even when we use morphine, which everybody, and that was one of my misconceptions when I started with hospice, is that morphine was just like you think about the battlefield in the Vietnam era. And that's what morphine was. But really, morphine is used for a lot more than that. It helps your lungs relax and helps that be a little bit more comfortable for you. So
Interesting.
Yeah, that is. I do think that, obviously being in home care, I see that, and people have that misconception. What is something that you would have for advice for someone, like me or people in my position in home care, that we could help, dispel some of those myths? Because that can be hard for us. Obviously, we're not experts, and I don't ever like to speak on something we're not, but we are put in that position where either we want to make that recommendation or we think we should, but it's such a hard conversation, and that can be hard for us to explain because that's not our thing. But how can we help the community understand that there's a brighter side?
sure. The reality of hospice in general is, more often than not, unless they're young, the person that is likely to be passing on hospice is okay with the conversation. A lot of times it's the family that's the more difficult hurdle. I sat in on a meeting once with a gentleman who had his two daughters with him. One was a physician, one was in biopharmaceuticals, and the conversation really was a difficult one. And it took about 10 to 12 different people to come in and be supportive in the conversation. And about halfway through, turned to one of his daughters and said, "I just don't want to disappoint you."
Wow.
He was ready,
It's tough.
but he was thinking about others before himself. And that's a tough thing to happen. And it happens a lot. And it's hard for us to be ready to let go of a loved one.
I've seen people, when I first started at Bright Star, we had a client who was 107. And I guess at the time, like, I would always speak with the daughter, and I knew her over the phone, not in person. So in my mind, I had thought of this like 60, 65-year-old woman, because that was the average age of most of the adult children of all my other clients, forgetting that he was 107. She was 87 herself. And she came down to visit one day and had said to him, "It's okay, you can go now." And he went that night. And I just remember always thinking, like, I think he really did hold on until he kind of got that okay. And then once she really gave that blessing, and that was that's always stayed
That's
with
very
me.
heartfelt.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, can you talk about, because, there's a lot of terminology out there and there's a lot of confusion on top of the terminology. So can you talk about palliative care and exactly what is palliative care and how that differs from other types of hospice care?
Sure. So that is part of the misconception, is everybody looks at them as being the same, and they're not. And in fact, Avow isn't just hospice. Avow has Avow Care Services, which encompasses our palliative care program. And we have our hospice program that is the hospice piece. As you remember at the beginning, I talked about 6 months or less where a disease to take its normal course. With hospice, we're also no longer seeking aggressive care. We just want to, again, enjoy whatever's left. With palliative care, you can have somebody who has a stage 2 cancer and they're getting nauseous. We can help control the nausea. That's not the focal point of an oncologist. And that's one of those pieces that we do. That's the easy answer with the cancer diagnoses. That's not necessarily terminal at that point. However, with palliative, there's also a lot of stress and anxiety that comes along with a newly created diagnosis that's terminal in nature or a serious illness. And so that anxiety is something that palliative also helps with. So the people in palliative are really still seeking aggressive treatment. They're not they're not quote unquote giving up, which even with hospice, you're not. I liken it to a basketball game. At the end of a basketball game, if you're getting beat by 25 points, you kind of stop playing as hard and you just accept what the end result's going to be. And I think that's kind of how hospice becomes. We recognize that we're at that end.
Interesting. So if someone has just received a diagnosis, do they just call Avow and say, I have this terminal diagnosis and I want to be on palliative care, or how does that work? And
it works the same for both services. I once had a gentleman walk into my office, and he was in the wrong building, but walked into my office and he said, I'm 84. I just got diagnosed with cancer and I want to get on hospice. I don't want to do this anymore. And that's okay. That you can refer yourself. We'll still work with your doctors. We'll make sure they're aware. We have to get records and things of that nature. But a lot of times, patients will call because they had a loved one on one of our services before.
Do you think that doctors are, like all of them embrace the hospice concept, or do you think that some of them shy away because it's a sad topic?
Well, and again, that kind of goes back to what I said when we started. It's a lot of this is because a doctor doesn't want to give you bad news. Doctors weren't trained to give up. Doctors were trained to heal. And so from that perspective, it's really hard for them to have that conversation and do that kind of thing. However, if you start your very first new patient visit with a doctor or your annual wellness visit with, hey, I just want you to know that, I know I'm getting older and I know I'm going to start having a lot more, difficulties and things happening in my life. I do want to have those conversations, those tough conversations, so that it's as comfortable as possible for me when I get to that point. I think you give your doctor the authority, and doctors are going to be a lot less concerned about or uncomfortable with those conversations.
Yeah, like you're giving them permission to have that sad
Correct.
conversation.
Yep. And is the hospice care provided in someone's home or at a facility?
Sure. One of the biggest misconceptions is hospice is a place. Hospice isn't a place, it's a service. We provide it in your home. We provide it if you lived in an assisted living or a skilled nursing facility. We've provided it to people who were homeless and lived under a bridge or in their storage unit. All of those places are places that we're going to provide service. Yes, we do have a hospice house, but our census runs close to 500 at any given time and on any given day. And only 16 of those can be in our hospice house. So the rest of them are actually out in the community. So that's quite a bit of people we're taking care of in that fashion.
And because I do senior housing, so do all senior housing communities accept your services?
Yes. So the big difference is, again, going back to that Medicare question that we had at the very beginning. Medicare pays for your skilled services at a skilled nursing facility. So if you're still there as a skilled patient, you can't use your Medicare benefit on both sides. So most of the patients, well, typically all of the patients in a skilled nursing setting are going to be patients who are now private pay and in a long-term bed. It might even be Medicaid that's paying for that bed. But yeah.
What about assisted living and independent living?
Assisted living, independent living, we have patients in all of those different locations. Most of those facilities have the appreciation of the extra help coming in. That's a part of that. And it's also, again, it helps them deal with their entire community from that perspective too.
What, so you mentioned you have 16 beds.
Mm-hmm.
What, do they have to meet a certain criteria to have that, or is it just based on availability?
Sure. So there's 4 levels of care for hospice. There's routine hospice, which we're doing for the majority of our patients. That's where you have a nurse coming out to see you, you have a home health aide, you have the various, we're changing the name to integrative therapies. We used to call them complementary therapies. But our music therapists, our massage therapists, all those people are coming to see you in your home, wherever you call home. Then you have what's called respite care. So Mrs. Johnson is supposed to be in Massachusetts for a wedding, and Mr. Johnson's on our services. We have relationships with a variety of places, including our hospice house, where Mr. Johnson can go for 5 days and be cared for while she goes away and doesn't have to be worried about it. The last 2 are kind of similar. Really, it depends on where it's happening. So we have crisis care or continuous care, which is 8 to 24 hours of direct nursing care. And that's primarily to help get somebody over a pain or a symptom that they can't get under control. And when it's continuous care, that's actually in the home or wherever they're calling home. The difference between that and the general inpatient care, which is what happens in our hospice house, the need is still the same. It's still that pain or symptom that we need to get under control, but we can't do it in their home setting, or they need such interaction with our nurses. It makes more sense to be in our hospice house.
You mentioned homeless population, and a couple episodes we had Dr. Pfaffer on here, and she had shared that at the Baker Senior Center that they provide some services to some homeless women, and the numbers she was sharing I thought were very sad, very scary. When you encounter that, what does that situation look like for you?
It can vary. It really depends on what their specific situation is and how that relates. If they're, for example, our palliative patients we'll see in our clinic, and they may be living in their car. But some people don't have the insurance component either, which again goes back to that Medicare, Medicaid. Sometimes somebody doesn't have the financial wherewithal. Avow's companies are nonprofit, so that really makes it easier for us because we have such a really strong philanthropic group that backs us through our foundation, that we have the ability to really meet the needs of the patients where they are. And so that really becomes part of that component of dealing with that homeless.
It's really sad. I guess when she shared those numbers with us, I mean, I knew there was homelessness here in Naples, but I guess maybe I didn't know it as much.
Yeah. And the other nice thing, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you,
no.
but the other nice thing is hospice and palliative both have a social work component to them. So we have the ability to help identify needs and where we might be able to help this, again, be a little bit more of a comfortable situation.
And Avow's been around for how long?
We're now in our 42nd year, if I'm not mistaken. So 1983, we started as Hospice of Naples downtown by the hospital, and moved up here onto our 22-acre campus that we're in now with a variety of stuff.
And is it just for Collier County residents, or is it for Lee County as well, or how does that work?
So really kind of unique. Florida is a certificate of need state when it comes to hospice. So you can't start a new hospice just because you want to have a hospice. That is not true for our palliative. So our hospice component is just in Collier County. However, our palliative program is starting to see that there's a need in Lee County with the closing of a couple of providers up there that did provide palliative care. So we've extended our reach out into Lee County for our palliative, and we just recently opened even in Immokalee one day every other week. We are in a physician's office to provide palliative care for those that can't get to our office.
Great.
I definitely want to talk about how it's paid for, but as you were talking, it kind of got me thinking about a couple other things. I love the butterfly event every spring, so I really do want to talk about that. And then this year at the butterfly event, I was talking with a lady I had met there, and she shared about I don't know what the right word to use is, but Pet Cemetery. Oh. Not the movie. Despite I was told this morning I need to watch that.
Pet grieving.
Yeah, but they have
we have a pet memorial garden.
Thank you. See, I knew you'd have a better word for me. I thought that was really special. Obviously, we're both dog lovers, so big into animals, and I have a gal that works in my office. I absolutely love her, and she rents. And about a year ago. Sorry, I threw that at you.
I caught it.
You did. Good job. She was telling me that she wants to move. And so she was like, but I really struggle because we've buried all of our animals in the backyard and now this is a rental. And do I dig them up? What do I do? And I don't know. I had never thought of that. And then when I was talking with this lady at the butterfly event, she was telling me that. And I thought, wow, that's so beautiful. Like, what a nice thing to be able to do that. So like, how did that come about? What is it like?
It's one of those things. We actually have a memorial garden for
humans too.
Yes. And you can sponsor a brick for your loved one or your pet. We even have a nice little bridge in our pet memorial garden. Oh God,
is that the Rainbow Bridge?
So, it is.
No.
So there's a little wooden bridge back there, but it's just a nice little opportunity to be able to remember on a regular basis. we are also very active, as you well know, in the veteran community. And we actually have memorial bricks around our flagpole now for veteran remembrance too.
I love that. I thought that that was just a really beautiful thing, because I wish that they would let people have animals in hospitals. I just think that it should
Well,
be allowed.
and you know, you don't really talk about losing a pet and the grieving process of losing a pet. And, you know, it's so traumatic for people that, you know, you've had your pet and your pet is part of your family, and, you know, it's all this unconditional love,
Yeah.
and your pet's gone. And
There's all these articles now coming out saying that, like, for some it says, the grieving is like losing a child, and I hate saying that because I don't have human children. I just have the furry ones, so like I don't want to be disrespectful to those with humans, but I really do think that that's there. So I thought that was really nice. I think animals are a big part of people's lives, and then I think you kind of kicked it in. So what about the grieving process? I know you guys have a lot of groups and different things when someone is losing or has lost a loved one.
Sure.
That's impossible.
Again, we have social workers who are helping work through that. We even have chaplains who are part of the hospice and palliative team. So you're dealing with those spiritual or psychosocial issues as we go right from the get-go. Hospice, part of the hospice benefit is the expectation that we're going to provide bereavement support for the following 13 months post somebody passing. So that is part of what it encompasses. And again, being a nonprofit, we're blessed with the opportunity to host a variety of groups through our bereavement program. We also, as you know, have our Avow Kids program, which helps kids deal with grief, but it's not just the grief of the loss of a loved one to death. They could be deported, they could be deployed, they could be going through a divorce. Those things are things that really kids struggle with. And so our Avow Kids program, which again has a nice building for the kids on our campus, is focused on making sure that they can deal with their grief. Our Avow Kids program works a lot with the school systems when they identify the grief too. So
great.
Can we get into the money now?
No, not yet.
Oh, come
Not yet.
on. All right.
Can you talk about 5 wishes?
Oh, I love this.
Sure.
So, because a lot of people, you know, you hear it, but you just don't know what it all is.
Yeah.
Sure. So our Avow Care Services program, which is the umbrella for our palliative program, provides advanced care planning opportunities. And part of that opportunity is getting into 5 Wishes. 5 Wishes is a national program, small booklet you can utilize to really go through some of the basics. Most physicians are going to go through the important key basics. Do you have your healthcare surrogate in place? Who is that person? Do you want to have CPR? Are you a do not resuscitate, the DNR form? Those kinds of things your physicians are going to go through with you. I like to get really deep into the whole thought process of the 5 Wishes, because for me, 5 Wishes means I'm going to hand you the playbook so that when I take my last breath, you don't have a whole lot of work to do. And so that book's going to give you things. When I die, do I want to be buried or cremated? When I die, do I want to be in the red dress or the blue dress? When I die, do I want to be, and my mom will probably be mad because I share stories about my family all the time, but my mom's expectation is my brother, who is in the military, is going to be able to take her ashes and make it into a firework. And my mom's always loved fireworks. So again, that's something that you'd want to put into a little book like that, 5 Wishes. 5 Wishes is should not replace your living will and things of that nature, but it should be a supplement that gives you that added detail. What songs do you want? Do you
I was
want
just
a
going to
whole
mention
full
the music
service?
part.
Do you want, all of those things? You can literally write them the playbook.
And do you, this little book, is it accessible? People get it?
Anybody can get them. They even have the electronic version online. And while I encourage people to do it, the important thing is not to forget something. And we encourage those who come in for advanced care planning with us, come in and have the doctor conversation, and then sit down with our social worker and make sure you touch all those touch points that are important to you. So we work through those people who need that extra assistance with making sure they didn't forget something within that document. And it's really one of those neat things that you can sit down with your kids, you can bring them. Medicare pays for this. So you actually can sit there all day long and not have to, obviously if you have a deductible or a copay or something, but it's just a really neat, unique opportunity to leave your kids with one thing that's less on their strain.
I learned about this booklet, I don't know, maybe about 6, 7 years ago. And we started putting them in all of our admission packets, and our nurses bringing them out at reassessments and different things. And I just thought of it kind of always as being like an informational tool, something to kind of, if they, and it's really been, I'd say a big talking point. A lot of people, come back and ask us follow-up questions or say, hey, you gave this to me, help me bridge that conversation with my loved one. Because even if you want to have that conversation, it still can be tough, sad. I made my mom do it. I learned a lot. She wants her ashes spread at Louis Vuitton and Nordstrom. I mean, so at least like my family's completely inappropriate. We just deal with humor for everything. But yeah, otherwise I would have had her sitting on the mantle, and she told me that's not where she wants to be. So, and God bless her, but she'll want Michael Feinstein playing. He's some old singer. But like if it was up to me, it'd be like In Sync or something a little bit more upbeat. But it's nice to have what their wishes are. And I do think of it as a gift, because it's something that I don't have to stress or think about. She's really given that to me nicely.
And we all know that things change, things happen unexpectedly. And so if you have all these wishes outlined, it's just one less thing you have to worry about.
And I feel like it brings that personal touch to it, because we've talked about like in prior episodes with like the financial planning or the legal planning or all these things. But I think there is something to be thought of, what music do you want playing, if you want that in your final moments or at a ceremony, or where do you want it? So many of these things, I think, that's the whole premise of why we have this podcast, is to plan for the future, right? But I think people plan to some point. We're trying to take them farther than that, but then it really does even go farther. And I think it is a really nice gift to give someone that you don't have to, you've got your death binder.
I was going to bring it up.
I know I could feel it. It just needs a better name. But yeah, I think it's a really nice gift to give, whether you're giving it to your spouse, your children, your parent, whatever. It is nice.
And the other important thing with that is not to just stick it in a drawer.
Right.
You have to go back and revisit it and make sure something didn't change. You didn't stop liking Taylor Swift, who's going to be in Miami all weekend.
I'll never be not liking Taylor Swift, and I'm very sad I'm not going to the concert.
But you should revisit it. You
Yes.
might have a change. You might have someone who was your healthcare surrogate who passed, and you didn't think of that because you were too worried and too grieving. So it's important to actually sit down with somebody again and go through those documents on a regular basis, which I'm sure your people that you've had from legal told you that as well.
It's, family dynamics.
Those change too.
Yeah. And so you might have a daughter saying, no, dad wanted this. And one son says, no, dad wanted this. And if dad should be in charge of all that.
So we actually had that exact thing happen in my family when my father passed. See, I told you my mom and my family I talk too much about my family.
My mother's all on here, don't worry.
So my father had cancer and was passing, and he had stipulated he wanted to have his ashes scattered appropriately in Gettysburg, appropriately at Quantico, where he was a career Marine for many years, obviously. And after that, he wasn't worried about it. And I had a brother who was very proud of my dad's military service and had a desire to have my dad at Arlington. So we were going to add that to the list. And as I went and did my research on how to do Arlington, part of that, fun fact, you cannot be buried in a national cemetery without giving them 100% of the ashes.
Really?
So now we had a conflict, because as children, we were hoping to be able to take my dad to Arlington. But my dad wanted some of his ashes in Gettysburg, his wish, some of them in Quantico, his
So did you just open the bag up and take a teaspoon out?
But that's the whole point. They expect 100% of the ashes. And it was a struggle for me and my brothers. How do we go about doing that? And finally, I put it in the hands of my dad's best friend. I sent him an email and I said, hey, would dad do this? And he said, absolutely not. He wouldn't lie to the government that he worked so hard for.
Yeah.
So my brothers and I very unhappily made the decision that we were going to still honor just what dad's wishes were, and came up with some other ways to make sure that the family had a good, but again, that's one of those things that if it's in writing, then you have it. If it's not in writing,
How do you fight that?
you don't know. So.
Yeah, that's tough.
But
That's a
So
very interesting fact.
it's interesting because it's very timely because I had a conversation with my sister who's probably listening to all this, and she's working through all her estate plans, and she's having some procedure done, so she's kind of all freaked out about everything. And she said, Bruce, I want to be buried in a Jewish cemetery over in Boca. I'm like, okay, like which one? like,
Right.
how do I know? And she said, oh, there's public ones. I'm like, you got to be a little bit more specific than that.
Yeah.
And
Yep. And that's the nice thing, again, with the social workers that are involved on both the hospice side and the palliative side. You're going to be able to make sure you've covered all your bases and that you have some specifics. And that's one of those benefits. You could say Jewish cemetery over in Boca, and you can write that in the 5 wishes, but it doesn't say which one. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
now somebody's got to make a decision. Well, I'd rather be in this one. Well, I'd rather be in this one. And now we have
It's complicated.
conflict that didn't need to occur. So
correct.
absolutely.
Wow.
Correct.
I drive down. I'm not good with the roads, even though I've been here 13 years. Pine Ridge. So right at 41, what is that? CVS, Walgreens, and then there's Pelican Larry's or Rusty's, whatever they call them now.
Yep.
And then there's a cemetery right there. And
Next to, there's an Indian restaurant right there.
yes, across the street. It's been like 100 different Indian restaurants.
Mhm.
Yeah. I always see that cemetery and think, I bet those people never thought that one day they'd be a bar on one side, a CVS on the other, 41, parallel to them. And I just think I think about that, like when I think about death and like where I don't want to be there in 100 years. I'd like to be somewhere different, not people walking across me when they're drunk trying to get to CVS. What do you think about? Can we talk about money now?
Yes, you can. And
God,
now is your time to
You know
talk
I
about
love
money.
numbers. Money,
Go
money, money.
for it.
Okay, how is hospice paid for?
So hospice is paid for by most insurances. Medicare covers hospice at 100%. So everything that's related to your hospice diagnosis is covered under the Medicare benefit. Same with Medicaid. Private insurances cover it as well. Typically, they will have a deductible and things like that you have to meet and so forth. That may still, and there are some that actually still cover just like Medicare does. Then there's, again, that small portion of people who, for whatever reason, do not have a means of paying for their services. Being a nonprofit hospice, it allows us the opportunity to take care of that person and ensure that they get the same care somebody else would have gotten. And that's reflective in things like our quality scores and things of that nature, where we're taking care of everyone. And, at end of life, we see people probably about 50% more than our competition in the last 7 days of life, because it's important to make sure that they're comfortable as they go.
When you had mentioned earlier, like crisis care, comfort care, and those are kind of, longer shifts around the clock or when all of that is included.
Sure. It's all covered. And
Wow.
there's different levels of reimbursement for that, obviously,
Right.
because we're providing more. But the Medicare benefit in particular covers it at 100%, no matter which level of care you're on.
And so someone calls you all up and they say, I need hospice care. I would like hospice care. Are there certain criteria that people have to pass? And do your all's team help people get approved through Medicare?
Sure. So there's a really great Avow app that actually lists the various diagnoses and things that are required to be met as quote unquote criteria. I always tell people not to get hung up on criteria, though, because if you have 2 or 3 or 4 disease processes, you may check 3 boxes on this one and 2 boxes on the COPD, and we can paint the picture of the appropriate person that's no longer going to be here. So what I tell everyone when you're thinking about hospice is, don't think about Dad's going to die next week. Think about, will Dad still be here at Easter? Because that's about 6 months from now. And that meets that expectation of prognosis of 6 months or less. And then we're the ones that take a look to see if it's appropriate. Because you know what? If you're not appropriate for hospice, we're going to help you get onto our palliative program and still get you the support you need.
Do you think that people know about the palliative program and really what it is? Or do you, I think that's such a great program. I've had so many patients and I wish more people knew about it or knew what it was. Or
Well, as much as I don't like it, I think I don't like the fact that people think this way. I like palliative, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But there's the tie between hospice and palliative that people can't get away from, because hospice is a palliative service, but it's not palliative care.
Right.
And so a lot of people get hung up on, I hear palliative, I think hospice. And when I hear hospice, I'm going to die. And what we're trying to really do right now with our messaging is to help people understand. And we speak more now about Avow Care Services than we do about Avow Palliative Care, which is under that umbrella. But really, it's the service that you're going to probably end up in with the Avow Care Services. And that palliative program, I'm not ready to stop seeing my doctors. I'm not ready to stop going to the hospital. I'm not ready. When you're not ready, you shouldn't be on hospice, but you also shouldn't be 3 weeks away from passing and not ready for hospice. So it's important to start talking that conversation about palliative much earlier than people do. And that's really been our focus with some of our messaging to physicians, for example, is don't have the hard conversation. Don't have the conversation that's uncomfortable. Have the easy one that says, and it's my favorite way to kind of coach my marketing team, is tell the physician that they should say to their patient, I don't think you're ready for hospice yet, but I think you need some extra help. You've taken the pressure off of the hospice conversation and made them think, oh, good, he's not telling me I'm dying tomorrow. Right. And you get them to palliative, where palliative can start using that social worker, that chaplain, that nurse practitioner to help them understand their disease process, to help them understand where they're at in the process of life and make it a little bit more comfortable. Because if you're on palliative 2 years ahead of when you pass, we can identify the daughter that's going to struggle with this and start working with her on, hey, I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow, but your mom's not going to be here in the next year or so. Let's start figuring out how we do this to make everybody comfortable.
It's great information. You mentioned something about Medicare and I know many people are thinking about hospice for elderly. What happens when somebody has, and I hate to go there, but like a child that is, terminal?
We provide hospice. It's unique that they can actually have both hospice and the break and still seek aggressive treatment when you're a child. And so we have several nurses who have dealt with pediatrics on a significant basis, and they're good at it. I could never do it. I can't imagine that, but they are there for the right reasons. Their hearts are in the right place, and they can have what's called concurrent care. They can still be seeking aggressive treatment and still be on hospice.
And is that private pay?
Again, unfortunately, most of those kids they're going to be on private insurance. They're going to have Medicaid, and the insurances pay. Again, with us being a nonprofit, we have the resources to make sure that no one dies without the services if they need them, no matter their age, no matter their status.
I know you guys have a lot of support services, grieving groups after. Is that only for people that had a family member on Avow, or can they come if?
No, the nice thing about our services is it doesn't matter where your loss was. You could have lost somebody in Massachusetts. This could be your place for season, as everybody likes to talk about. And you can still come utilize our groups. We have groups that we started, and they were together as a group for a year or two, and they all stuck together as friends, and they meet at Perkins, and they stay together. They're still having their own ability to deal with their grief years later.
I like that. I like that they found people.
We try to be even-handed. We don't want to promote one company over the other. So are there other hospice organizations in this area?
Sure. So that takes you back to the certificate of need. It keeps you within counties. We are the original hospice in the area, and our hospice has been around since 1983. There was a CON, I think it's probably 15 to 17 years ago now, that was triggered, quote unquote, that's what they say in the lingo, if you will. And Vitas is in the area. They're a national chain that's a for-profit entity. And they still provide a good service. I don't begrudge them that way. And when anybody wants to know the differences between them, I coach them to go to Medicare Compare. That's the easiest place, no matter where you live. If people on your podcast are listening in Massachusetts, they can go to Medicare Compare. And
is it MedicareCompare.com?
It's Medicare.com. And then when you search I typically just go to my search engine and type in Medicare Compare Hospice, and it takes you straight to that website, and you put in your zip code, and your zip code will tell you, and it tells you everything about them, what their census is.
Wow.
It tells you whether they're for profit, whether they're not for profit. It tells you, or other. It can also tell you when you click that link, it will also tell you the ownership of it. So, and without diving deep down into an ugly hole, there are some issues in Texas and California right now as it relates to hospice, because there are a lot of people who are somewhat taking financial advantage of the hospice benefit with Medicare. And so this allows you to kind of see who you're dealing with. There's a lot of private equity money getting into hospice right now, which isn't necessarily for the right reason.
I know that you guys have a great foundation. You've referenced it a couple times, and I know there's a lot of great people in the community that help and support too. But what would you say is the number one need that you guys have?
That's a good one. I wasn't ready for that one.
I know, but you said so much good stuff that made me think about it.
Quite honestly, if you were to ask me what would be the one thing somebody could do for us, it would be volunteering.
Okay.
Our volunteer program is robust. It's actually a requirement from Medicare. 5% of the patient hours that we log are supposed to be through our volunteer program. So having somebody sitting vigil with a family member that's passing, or spending time with someone and who can't quite, they're again that person that's alone and by themselves, and volunteers are a major portion of what we do. And so if you were to ask me what was the one thing we need, it's I would love to have more volunteers than we knew.
And what would a volunteer do?
So again, they can sit with someone in our hospice house. They can greet people as they come into our hospice house. Some of the things are more on the administrative side. Again, as a nonprofit, we run a little bit leaner and try to provide a lot more. And so sometimes our volunteers are sitting at our front desk welcoming people when they walk in the very front door of our organization. They put together the various patient packets that we have, and our veteran stuff. When we give, we do these bead bookmark kind of things for Vietnam veterans, and there's a specific way you have to do the beads. And so some of our veteran volunteers help make stuff like that. So
for our listeners that wanted to get interested in learning more about becoming a volunteer, how can they do that?
I would say that you are going to reach out to Avow either by phone and just ask for volunteer department, and you're going to get either Allie or Cynthia, and one of the two of them is going to help kind of go through the process. It's still you're still going to have to go through some of the structured things because you're going to potentially be interacting with patients. So background checks and that kind of thing that have to happen.
I like it.
And how, like specifically, how can someone reach Avow?
So avowcares.org is a place that you can get lost. Again, you can go through. We have tutorials on how to care for your loved one in English and Spanish on there. And we are working on our Creole side because, again, we do a lot of work in the Creole community as well. They can just reach out and call us at 239-261-4404.
Perfect.
Can you do that again? Just a little bit slower.
A little slower. Yeah. I had to do it that fast because I have to remember it when I look it on my card in my mind. It's 239-261-4404.
And it's avowcares.org.
We are .org again for the nonprofit.
And your home base is located where?
So we're here in Naples, just off of 75 in Pine Ridge. We're right behind the Nissan dealership on Whippoorwill. It's a beautiful campus. If anybody just wants to come and kind of pre-plan, you go to a funeral home or you go to a cemetery and you kind of figure out what you want. You should kind of come by and take a look at the hospice house too.
It is beautiful.
The little maze, what's that called?
The labyrinth.
Yes.
That's behind our blue fountain. Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yep. And it's really neat because there are times when I see family members of people who are probably in our hospice house who are out there walking the labyrinth just for reflection. And it's just such a cool thing. And obviously Lake Glenna, named after our founder, Bruce and Glenna Hayhoe. Bruce left us almost 2 years ago now. And
good name.
He was he was one of our founders and was a patient that he used it exactly right. Jimmy Carter currently using hospice exactly the way you're supposed to. So.
Wow. Is there anything that we didn't go over today that you want to share about Avow or any of the wonderful things you do?
You did talk about the butterfly.
That is my favorite event.
That is one of my favorite events too. We go down in Cambier Park and rent the park out and read probably 1,000 or more names.
I don't know how you guys read the names.
Those who have passed. And it's always fun because the plane's flying over in the middle of it. You have to be timed just right or pause at the right time. So
I was
that's
playing
always fun.
tennis one time, and all these butterflies flew over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The courts are right there, aren't
Yeah.
they?
It's awesome, and you don't have to have had a loved one that we're reading to come and enjoy it. Again, we have the kids there. You guys come out. We appreciate your support so much.
Yeah. It's I think it's beautiful. I think the people that get up there and read the names, those people are saints. I don't know how they do it. Mitchell, who
Dannenberg.
yeah, not this past April, but the April before, he was there. And I knew that they were going to read his mom's name, and that was extra hard to, see him there. And then you meet people, and some people come in groups with their family, and they have the T-shirts and things, and then you see the people that come alone, and that always breaks my heart too. But they're there, and it is beautiful. All the butterflies are beautiful. It's nice to go into the tent, and you see all the butterflies, and there's people taking pictures, and the kids are there, and then it is beautiful to read the names and have them go. I don't know how that event came to be or anything. It's always been around that I've been here. It's a beautiful thing, and whoever came up with it.
Yeah,
Is that April?
It's usually the first Saturday in April. I think we have a quirky thing about this next one. So the easiest way to make sure you keep up with all that kind of stuff is on our social media stuff.
Yeah.
We are on Facebook, and if
You
you
are.
follow us on Facebook, you get to see that. You get to see the car show. Our Treasures resale shop, which is on 41 in the old For Love of Golf building.
Yeah.
We'll have specials on there when they're having discounted days, and they always have great stuff there. So, and if you have stuff to donate, that's another way you can help us,
Really?
is drop off stuff there, and they're more than happy to take
Well,
it.
I love to purge, so donate everything. Donate the couch just when I want a new one.
There you go. Jeff, it's been a pleasure having you here. It's wonderful. You've shared some wonderful information, very insightful, very heartfelt. So
Well, I
great having
appreciate
you.
you guys thinking of me, and we're always happy to be supportive of stuff like this that all of our people that we work with in the community do. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone that's here local to definitely check out the volunteer. I imagine any amount of time someone could give is appreciated. And I know that there's a lot of people here that their families do not live here. So I think that even, being a volunteer and sitting with a patient has to be such a need. And I think that's a great gift you're giving to someone, because a lot of people aren't here, their families, which I think is sad.
At V-Image Productions, we know that every story has its own rhythm, a unique look, and moments worth capturing. From photography that freezes time to cinematography that brings those moments to life, we don't just shoot, we create. Our passion for storytelling and attention to detail mean that each project, big or small, gets the same dedication, the same creativity, and the same V-Image touch. Whether it's a corporate event, social media content, or a promotional campaign, we're here to help you tell your story your way. V-Image Productions. Your image is our focus. Call today for more information at 239-287-5577.
So next week, we're going to switch gears, but
Yeah.
we're kind of similar topic. We're talking about honoring our veterans. It's going to be Veterans Day, and so we're going to have the CEO from Patriot Angels talking about VA benefits and how you can apply for benefits to help pay for home care and senior housing.
Yeah, I'm really excited
Awesome.
about that. I think they do great work. I love the veterans event that's usually in February. That's always, I think, a good one. I love that when you come, you see all the services that are here, because I think people really don't know how many services really are here for veterans. And there's a ton. So I'm excited to talk with them and learn about helping people know about their benefits.
Yep, that Veterans Expo is really awesome. There's 60 plus vendors, and
I love the breakfast that they do. Everyone sits down. This last year, Senta and I were there, and we had breakfast with a guy, and he, you think like a normal guy, and then he starts telling us his story, and the both of us are just floored. Like, you have no clue who is there. And I love that they do the breakfast, and then they go over and they see all of the resources that are there. And even for us, it's a reminder of really everything that's here. Whatever you could dream of really is here. You just have to know about it.
Yep.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media. You can also find more information and resources at www.theaginggamepodcast.com.